Hi everyone, today we start our AP exam review. As you know, this year the test has a different format than traditional tests. You are going to be given two FRQs. There's going to be no multiple choice questions. You're going to take the exam at your house or at some place where you have access to the internet. You're going to be able to handwrite and upload an image of your response, or what I prefer you do if you're a good typer is just type the response, copy and paste it into the testing software and upload it that way. You're going to be assessed on units 1 through 11 of our book, which corresponds to units 1 through 7 of the new curriculum, which I'll get to in a minute. And most importantly, make sure you make note of the new date. The new date is going to be May 19th, and it's going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern time for us. Okay, so let's talk about what they're going to actually be assessing you on. You're going to have two questions. The first question is you're going to be given 25 minutes to answer. That will represent about 55% of the weight of your exam score, and that's where they're going to be testing the concept application, your ability to explain behavior and apply theories in authentic contexts. So they're going to give you a authentic context, like a little story or a snippet of vignette, and you're going to explain the behavior that's demonstrated in that context, or apply theories and perspectives that you think are related that are listed as tasks. They're called tasks. Those bullet points at the bottom of our FRQs are technically called tasks. So you will have 8 tasks on the concept application question. The first FRQ will give you 8 bullet points in which you're going to explain the behavior and apply theories about the story you just read, and apply theories to that question. Okay, then the second question is going to be a question that you're given 15 minutes for. It represents 45% of your exam score, and that will be on research methods. What they're going to be looking for you to be able to do there is analyze research studies and interpret quantitative data. I'm going to get into that a little bit more in a minute. There are going to be 6 tasks on that question. You're going to have 15 minutes, and you're going to be given 6 bullet points, probably some information. You're going to have to probably interpret some data, analyze some research that they're describing in the problem, and that's it. You're done with it. Okay, so what to expect. There was a webinar the other day for AP teachers, and Trevor Packer, he is part of the College Board, and he explained what to expect the day of the exam. So before your exam, by April 24th, which is coming up, you must contact the College Board if you have any technology problems, such as you don't have a printer, you don't have access to Wi-Fi. They can't really help you with a printer, but they can help you resolve some of your other issues. This is the website right here, so you can click on that and notify them immediately if you're not going to be able to meet the technology needs of the exam. Okay, so then also by the week of the 27th, we are going to find out more information and become familiar with what's actually going to look like. The online classroom task interface is what it's called. And we're going to get to see what it's going to look like the day of the exam, so that there's no surprises. So there will also be an opportunity for a simulation, so you can practice uploading the documents. And then 48 hours before the test, you're going to get a ticket. And this ticket is unique for you. You'll get it by email, and there should be a copy in your College Board account. So if you're not getting emails from College Board, please make sure you resolve that as soon as possible, so that we don't have a problem leading up to the exam. About 15 minutes before, I would suggest that you guys get on earlier than that so that there's no problems. But about 15 minutes before the actual exam is to begin, about 1:45, you're going to sit down. They're going to ask you some questions, and they're going to confirm your identity. Now, what I want you to really pay attention to, which I know some of you might get anxious about this, I know your exam is supposed to begin at 2 o'clock, and every minute counts. However, please be aware that students, since there's so many people across the whole country taking this test at the same time, not everyone can enter at the same exact time. So students will be entered in waves over about a 5-minute period. So that means that you may get into your exam, you may get let into your exam at 2:01. They're not going to take that off of your total time. You will still get the 25 minutes to complete your first FRQ. Okay, so please don't get worried about that. Just be patient. You will be, as long as you're there and ready to go and you have all your information entered, you'll be able to start the exam on time. There will be a worksheet that they're going to give you prior to the exam, and please have that with you the day of the exam. It will probably be something to help prevent cheating and plagiarism of some type. Okay, so during the exam, none of the FRQs are going to require you to draw a chart or a graph. So when we discuss research, we're not going to really focus on how to construct the graphs and the charts, but mostly how just to analyze them. Okay, keep your browser open. It will have a countdown clock. There will be a clock just like I put up in our classroom. There's going to be a clock that will indicate to you how much time you have left until you have to upload your response. Recommended that you have one window open to type in your response, and then another window open with the prompt and the countdown clock. So you should perhaps open up a Word document or a Google Doc, type your response in there, and then copy and paste it into the online test system. This will reduce the chances of losing your response halfway through if for some reason you lose your internet connection or something like that. Okay, so we are going to prepare like we've always prepared. Yes, I know that you are going to have access to your notes and Google and online textbooks and your textbook right next to you, but College Board is also aware of that. This is not a test. Remember, we talked about validity. This is not a test to measure how quickly you can look up terms, copy, paste, reword, rephrase, and send. I'm sure many of you would score very high if that were the test that we were those skills that we were trying to assess. But that's not what we're trying to do here. We want to assess your AP Psych knowledge. And for that reason, let's talk a little bit more about what College Board is expecting on the day of the exam. They know that some of you will be able to write your responses very quickly because you will know the information and you'll be able to word it very quickly. Some of you may know the information and not be able to word it and type it as fast as others. And that's expected. So please do not get upset if you don't get to send in your full response within the time frame. They are expecting that there will be students who do not finish their question, and that does not mean that you still can't get a great passing score, even a 5. Okay? Now, the reason why they're doing this is because they're trying to diminish the opportunity to cheat and look everything up. Like I said, they're trying to test your AP Psych knowledge, and the only way they can really do that is by giving you a lot of terms to define in a short amount of time and see what you know. That doesn't mean that if you can't type fast or you don't know everything and you can't come up with the words as quickly as others, that you will do poorly. They are trying to put these measures in place to help make sure that they can tell that you know what you know. Okay? So, after 25 minutes, the screen timer will turn red and tell you to upload and submit. You're going to be given a 5-minute upload period. This is not a 5-minute period to further your response and try to upload it at the very last second. Do not do that. Okay, I'm telling you, just submit it when it turns red, because if there's any reason for them to believe that you were taking extra time past the 25 minutes to type a response and you didn't get it in on time for that reason, they will not qualify you for the makeup exam, and your response will not be scored. Okay, so send it in when the light turns red. If anything else happens, like there's another technical issue, as long as you tried to send it in by that time and something else came up, that may warrant a retake. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Don't waste your time trying to define each bullet point. I know when we talked through the year about SOTAs, I told you it's very important to define and apply every bullet point. In this under these circumstances, I really don't think you should spend the time with a separate definition than the application. You have to make sure though that your application is really clearly showing the definition of the term and how it applies. You cannot be vague at all. If you're vague and the reader thinks that you might be actually describing another psych term, they will not be able to give you the point for that. So you have to make sure that you're very clear if you're not going to do a separate definition for your application. Okay, cheating. I know that this is not going to be a problem for my students because you would not do that, but I just want to give you a heads up that College Board has already reported that they have found a student trying to coordinate a plan to cheat on the AP Physics exam. What is really the most important thing I want you to get from this is that colleges will be contacted this year to prevent this cheating possibility, okay, and to make you more concerned that this is really a real thing. Don't even do it, okay? That's all I can really say about that. If you are strong enough and you have a really great knowledge base and you're going to do great on this exam, do not waste your time trying to help others. You really need to look out for yourself at this point. And if you don't have a strong knowledge base and you didn't put the time into study and you try to take advantage of the online things and copy and paste, believe me, they have many layers in place to catch cheaters. They know what you know, and they know how to get things the way you know how to get things, and they are going to prevent that from happening. Okay. Also, there's another safeguard in place. Teachers are going to get a copy of your responses. So I will get a copy of a response. If it looks suspicious, we have to report that to College Board. So make sure you know, I know how you write, I know how you sound. Make sure that your response is your own. Okay? I know that you guys are going to do a great job, so I'm not really worried about that. Okay, so 7 units on the 2020 exam. Remember, I told you that our textbook units would be numbers 1 through 11. However, that is differently organized than the 7 units in the new AP curriculum, as we've seen on AP Classroom. So let me just show you how that's broken down. Unit 1 of our textbook, which is in this column, corresponds to Unit 1 in the new curriculum. That's easy. But Unit 2 in our textbook also falls into the category of Unit 1. Unit 3 and 4, we did biological, all the things we did with neurons, and states of consciousness with sleep. They lumped those 2 units in our textbook into what they call Unit 2 in the new curriculum. Sensation and perception is the same. Learning is the same. Cognition is part of cognitive psychology. And the most recent unit we did, testing and individual differences, is also part of their cognitive psychology unit number 5, which is why I gave you that AP Classroom assignment the other day. Okay, developmental psychology stays the same, and motivation, emotion, and personality used to be 2 separate units in our book, but now they are lumped into one called Unit 7 in the new curriculum. Okay, and that is the unit that we ended off right before we started this review. Okay, now, what do they actually want you to do? When we're talking about concept application for the first FRQ, they want you to be able to define, explain, and apply concepts and theories and behaviors and perspectives to the situation that you're given. Okay, so we are going to talk more about that when we get into FRQ writing, but I wanted you to see the list that they expect you to be able to do. Describe characteristics, attributes, traits, and elements in defining terms and concepts. This is huge. This is basically where our Quizlet reviews and practice with writing definitions will be really important. Classifying concepts, that's very important. Describing structures and functions, that will usually probably involve some type of biological component. Describing patterns and trends. Identify steps and stages in a process. We know there's many psychological processes that have multiple steps and stages, and being able to identify those steps and stages, especially when you're describing what's going on in a situation, will be very important. Also explaining the relationship between steps or stages in a process. Why does one thing happen before the other? How does it lead to the next thing that happens? And why is it important? What is the relevance or the significance of these interactions? Also, we have some cases where it's very clear there's not a lot of steps. It's just a cause and effect relationship between 2 concepts that might be tested on in this exam. That's where we're going to describe the cause and effects. We have to explain them. Sometimes you can explain the relationship between concepts. One thing might lead to another. Higher levels of a certain neurotransmitter might lead to a certain consequence. That's a relationship. Now, we don't know if it causes the condition, or vice versa, if the condition causes the neurotransmitters to be imbalanced, but we know that there is a relationship. and we can also explain the reason for the relationship in some cases. Okay, so that is what define and apply concepts means. The second thing that they will want you to be able to do is describe a behavior and why it's happening in a particular circumstance. So let's say somebody is like performing on stage and they're feeling a certain way or they're exhibiting a certain behavior. You're going to be able to explain why that behavior might be occurring using psychological concepts. Okay, and then we also have applying theories and perspectives. When we learned about different type of perspectives, like there's biological perspective, that is a really easy one to remember. We can explain behaviors depending on what type of perspective we are taking on that behavior. The biological perspective, we can also explain behavior from a cognitive perspective, what's happening in the brain in terms of memory, maybe recall, things like that. We can also explain development perspective, where the person might be in a certain stage of development and that's why they're exhibiting certain behaviors. We can also explain behavior from a social and personality perspective, where maybe the social circumstances that the person is in are leading to the behavior, or maybe it's part of their personality. We can also explain behavior from a clinical perspective. Okay, so that would be another type of way that they might assess you on your concept application. Okay, now FRQ2 is going to be on research design, and research methods, it's actually called. In this, you're going to be expected to be able to analyze and interpret quantitative data. This can come in the form of a graph, it can come in the form of some statistics or numerical values that you might have to interpret. Okay, so it's very important that you be able to make connections between the data and psychological processes and concepts that you've learned about. Okay, so we have data analysis. You will be able to analyze the results of a research study. You can be able to connect them to different psychological perspectives and principles, and also use statistics to analyze data. And when we say use statistics, we're not going to be asking you to calculate statistical significance or correlation coefficients, but there may be a need for you to be able to calculate mean, median, and mode. It says right here, use a data set, have them calculate the mean and identify the median and the mode. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that you guys are capable of doing that. We will review that when the time comes. Lastly, I want to tell you that the third skill category they're trying to assess on your AP Psychology exam in 2020 is your ability to analyze psychological research studies. Now, up here, one of the skill was analyzing the data. Now they also want you to be able to analyze the actual research method and study. Okay, so we want you to be able to identify flaws if there are any. We want you to be able to draw conclusions from the research and the results. Okay, so this is going a step further from not just looking at the data and knowing what's going on, but knowing the implications of that data. And we are going to, of course, talk about the difference between correlation and causation, which we've talked about many times. And okay, so you're going to have to be able to just identify the research method used, identify any ethical and design flaws, describe the appropriate use of a research method or design. Did the researchers choose the correct method or design their research appropriately for what they're trying to achieve? And how are ethical or research design flaws, how can they be corrected? If you find that there was a flaw in the research, how can it be corrected? How can this researcher adjust their study so that we can avoid these design and ethical flaws? Why is a certain research method design appropriate? We're going to talk about the pros and cons of different research methods. It's very important to know. And also the implications and limitations of different research designs. Why the conclusions are appropriate or not appropriate based on the method of design is really also a very important way to analyze psychological research. You have to be able to make sure that the conclusions that the individual drew after they looked at their data was appropriate. Otherwise, the research is not really something that we'll be able to use in our field. Okay, so lastly, just going to give you a quick traditional research methods question. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I just want to show you. We will do plenty of practice with this. I wanted to show you there can be, in this question, the kids were given a graph. Then they were asked to identify the operational definition of the dependent variable. So we do have to do that. Explain how the data supports or does not support each of the psychologist's hypotheses. Explain why the psychologist cannot generalize. Generalization is very important. We've talked about that many times, and we're going to explain in this research why the psychologist would not be able to generalize her findings, and why the study is not naturalistic observation. That was one research method we talked about. We will get back into that again when we get into specifics. Then you notice how they have 3 bullet points here that are asking you how the following might have played a role in the children's behavior. So we have sort of like a concept application within the research question. We still need to know these key concepts from psychology and how they apply to what happened in this research. So what I'm going to do for you guys as we practice this FRQs and what College Board has done on the AP Classroom page is they've given you model FRQs and they have provided you with a rubric to see how you would have done on it. So it will look like this. Point 1, operational definition of a dependent variable. They will explain to you what will score means, what will get you the point. In this case, whether the children took the additional candy scores as an operational definition of the dependent variable, but they will not score, they will not give you a point if, number 1, you operationally define the independent variable, or if you aren't specific and you say something like some candy and don't specify additional candy. And once you read this prompt, you'll understand more what they're talking about there. But I just want to show you the specifics of what they're looking for when they score your FRQ. Point 2, data support. Okay, so they said, did the data support the psychologist's hypotheses or not? And what they're looking for you to say is that the data did not support the hypothesis, but that it did support the other psychologist's hypothesis. So one psychologist in this FRQ had a hypothesis and the other one had a different one, so they want you to make sure you say that the data supported one of theirs. Generalizability. Okay, we have to say, they're looking for you to say that the psychologist cannot generalize the findings in this case, and it's because of sampling bias, or there was no random sampling, or the psychologist only used children in her neighborhood. That's what they were looking for this question. So what you have to be really careful about is addressing what's happening in your context. Okay, so you don't want to just say how results can be generalized generally in research. You have to be very specific to what happened in this research that they're asking you about. And naturalistic observation, that you can read that later. Okay. Now the 3 concept points that were within there: modeling, de-individuation, and Lawrence Kohlberg's pre-conventional stage. So here's what I want you to notice. Modeling. They want you to say, in this case, that the children were imitating what they saw others do. But if you say something about children's obedience, that is not a evidence of modeling. Obedience is not a consequence of modeling behavior, so they want to make sure that you do not write something like that. De-individuation, we probably won't visit this in our exam this year because that does come from the social psych unit, so I'm just going to move right past that. Don't worry about that. Lawrence Kohlberg's pre-conventional stage, this is, we're looking for you to say that it's linked to the children's narrow self-interest. Remember we talked about Kohlberg. Pre-conventional is when the child is really just doing behaviors to achieve a reward or avoid a punishment. Okay, we're not looking for compliance or obedience because that actually happens in the conventional stage. And then the abstract stage was his post-conventional stage. So pre-conventional specifically talks about your behavior in terms of trying to receive or an award or avoid a punishment. Okay, so just trying to show you specifics of what they're looking for in your response. And lastly, here are a bunch of links for stuff you can use to start reviewing. We have the link to the College Board's updates that you can keep revisiting because they're constantly updating it. You also have a link to, which I think is priceless. It is the free response questions and scoring information archive for every AP exam from past years. Then the AP Psychology review videos the College Board has been providing, which we're going to be doing next week, and a Quizlet created by Virginia Well. This is 427 terms. I don't expect you to know all of them, but give yourself a quick flip through one day and start starring the ones that you need to go through. I'm sure you know a lot of them already. And a physical list of this list of vocabulary terms is available through this link. And lastly, we have a Crash Course Psychology playlist. If you're going through these psychology review videos and you just feel like you need a little bit more, crash courses, of course, are really valuable resources for just jamming in a bunch of information at once. So sometimes you might just need to rehear it from a different voice, rehear it with some different graphics, and that would be a great way to do that. Okay, so I will see you guys soon.